Okay, we'll start anyway from the content. This is the topic national policy and Sri Lankan economy. Under this, there are two topics. One is national policy and Sri Lankan economy, but only one question. Maybe in the question there are maybe two parts, A, B, O, like that. First of all, I will teach you the national policy and I will come back to the Sri Lankan economy, although the your expected outcomes is first initially Sri Lankan economy and subsequently national policy. When I explain the national policies, that would be help to learn the Sri Lankan economy side also better. But mainly now, once I teach you the national policy concepts, then you can think why our country having this kind of economic situation today. Now here, under Sri Lankan economy, potential for the development of Northeast and Southeast, forms of government, concept of good governance, government economic policy, fiscal policy, growth, balance of payment, education, employment, unemployment, social harmony, peace, major constraint, and energy policy, transportation policy, infrastructure. Those are the things under we have to learn, but we'll try to focus on key policies. Under national policies, we will try to learn what kind of national policy framework of our government. In that, these things you can download it from the our ministry national policies, and all the things are there, but here I am summarizing the key content related to the particular topic. Now, any country, I think, first priority is the national security. Same way, Sri Lanka also given the same priority to the national security. Then under national security, so many things are there: secure work environment, country free from drugs, then an efficient country free from corruption. That is our second national policy framework pillar. There are 10 pillars, 10 key policies you can identify that is identified in the government constitution by the government itself. Then an efficient governance mechanism, defeating corruption, state enterprises management policy. Then our foreign policy, they have mentioned as the non-aligned friendly foreign policy. Number 4, they have mentioned new constitution that fulfills the people's wishes. Then productive citizenry and vibrant human resource. Number 6, they have mentioned people-centric economic development, macroeconomic targets, new tax policies, cost of living, export crops. Number 7, they have mentioned technology-based society, global innovation hub, IT entrepreneurship, citizen-centric digital government. Then number 8, they have mentioned as the development of physical resources. Number 9, sustainable environment management, lands. Now that have constitute of all the physical past lands, industries, waste management, biodiversity, settlements and cities, environmental educations, discipline. And then number 10, they have identified as discipline, law abiding and values-based society. Now, based on these 10 policies, they have developed the sector policies. Now, every sector, now in Sri Lanka, I think these sectors mainly based on different ministries, and these ministries having their own sector policies. Now, these sector policies, they may have developed by engaging the consultants maybe engaging the experts, having stakeholder views, all the things. Now here, I will just give you some examples of the key sector policies. Then every sector policy, based on these sector policies, they have developed their action plans, they have developed their objectives, all the things. Now, just think about these things. We'll go, no need to memorize any policies. Now, I may not ask you about anything regarding what is the sector policy of the education sector, higher education sector, that kind of questions I won't ask. I will ask about the overall Sri Lankan content, but just go through these things, then you can easily understand what kind of things you may have to grab within this lecture. Now, under education key sector policy, they have mentioned assuring that no child is left behind in the education frontier by ensuring access to quality and inclusive education by encouraging 13 years of education, laying the foundation for creation of educated and disciplined nation equipped with basic competencies and skills in order to achieve sustainable development based on knowledge-driven economy. Now, I think all of us may, most of us, maybe all of us may have used this education institute, maybe our government schools, then free education until our school education, maybe the university education, all the things. But here, mainly the education, they have split education, primary, that means school education and the higher education later. Now, here their theme is no child is left behind. I think that's the government policy under the education sector. Then higher education, enhancing the quality and relevance of the university education to produce professionally competent and capable graduates to meet socio-economic development in the country. Now, I think almost all of us have passed through the Sri Lankan university system, maybe different universities, but it's free education. And you can see now you are professionally competent. Now you are sitting for the charter and you are serving in the Sri Lanka to meet the socio-economic development in the country. Now this is the primary and secondary education, then tertiary education. Now whoever may not able to go into the national universities, then they have developed this skill development and vocational training policies as well, making every Sri Lankan skilled, enabling full employment in the global economy while improving their competencies, soft skills, and access to quality vocational education. Now, under labor, I am not reading everything because there are so many things I have to cover in this particular topic, and I want to start the second part as well, national economy part as well. Then labor. Now, do not think these things are merely divided into the ministries or anything, but major topics. Labor, protecting the rights of the workers and achieve healthy industrial relations. In this context, while enforcing existing laws and regulations, all necessary reforms will be made in coming years to meet the emerging circumstances and to bring them in line with the international best practices. Now, without having such policy, you may not able to regulate the industries. Not only the industries, maybe the government institution, whoever employ the people for the maybe as a working people. Then other thing is the health sector. improving national health services, targeting a healthy nation with necessary institutional and policy reforms, and increase investment on health while recognizing the importance of coexistence of different forms of medicine and participation of the private sector in health services. Now, here, when the government form a sector policy, do not think every time they are forming these health policies only based on the government uh, interference. Definitely, now education sector also, they are expecting private sector participation. Now you can see how many private schools are there, private universities, everything. Now, to regulate these kind of things, definitely central government should have a good sector policy. Without the sector policy, these public-private entities may not able to fulfill their objectives. Now, then other under sports, I'm not going into the details of all the things. Then culture and heritage, science, technology, and research. Now, I will just read this one. Building capacity and strengthening of research and development through intensification of advancement and dissemination, as well as the application of knowledge in the state of art technology. Now, I think everyone is talking about artificial intelligence, all the things. Now, we need so many research and development within our country to cater our future demands, or maybe our products. We may need more innovative things. Now, under science, technology, and research, they have identified to develop those competencies through the sector policies. Then other main thing is information and communication technology. Now that's also very attractive sector. Now still our governments, they are trying to develop these sector policies. Now here promoting local ICT products and services in the global market under digitization of Sri Lankan economy. It includes partnerships with multiple stakeholders to provide assistance and funding to establish new export-oriented IC enable service industries and empowering the local industry. Now, so many things you can read here. Now, if you want to develop further, there are so many subsections, sub-activities they have identified under these key sector policies. Then crop agriculture, livestock, plantation, fisheries, land and land development, industry, international trade and foreign investment. Now, this is also very important thing. Now, without foreign direct investment, we may not able to enhance our Sri Lankan economy. Why? FDI, for the foreign direct investments, means that will bring foreign exchange to the country. These foreign investors, they may invest their money in Sri Lanka, and they may form maybe the service sector or maybe the goods they may produce. Now, to start their factories or maybe their service sector companies, definitely Sri Lanka should have a good foreign investment policies. Then tourism, now that's the other main thing. Then land and transport, port and shipping, aviation, then power and energy. Now this one, I will do it in detail because in this particular module, ISL wants to elaborate two sector policies, mainly power and energy and the transportation policy. That I will do in next slides. Then irrigation and water resource development, that's also very important sector policy. Now, when you do the irrigation and water, our main objective is ensure the water availability to water users, providing water in adequate quantities with improved management, enhanced productivity, and water use efficiency while paying attention to the spatial variation of water availability in the country. I think you know that our country mainly depend on the power sector, also depend on hydropower, and our all irrigation depends on the water reservoirs, water resource, and we are getting mainly the monsoons. Based on this monsoon, we are having 2 paddy cultivation seasons. Then all our agriculture sector depends on this water from the reservoirs. Then we need the proper water management policies. To have that kind of water management policies, government has introduced the irrigation and water resource development sector policy tools. Then water supply and sanitation. Now that's also main item in a sector. Then housing and construction, urban development, judicial system, public management, and that's also everyone is talking, increasing efficiency and effectiveness of the public service through empowering and motivating public servants and using modern technology and techniques while ensuring accountability and transparency in the provision of quality public service. Now, in our perception, in our perceived mind, we think when you go to a public organization and the private organization, we may think we may have to waste so many, that means so long time, stay in queue, so maybe to carry out the work, it may take long time in public organizations. But when you go to a private organization, they may do the work very efficiently. Now here, main thing they are focusing is to increase the efficiency and the effectiveness of the public service. Then social integration also considered as the main sector policies. I think after this post-war situation, so many rebuilding, reassuring, and re-establishing harmony in political, economic, and social spheres among the people and eliminating suspicion and distrust among communities in every corner of the country. This is very important and most vulnerable policy. Why? If you have any distrust or suspicion among the communities, whole country may have to have the impact on that kind of issues, and that will have an impact to the other sectors as well. Then our foreign affairs, that's also very important thing. According to our government, constitution itself, it's mentioned as Sri Lanka is a non-aligned country. That means we are not aligned to any Western or the other countries. But you may think with the present situation, whether Sri Lanka is complying or whether you can't say we are not complying, but there may be some favoration, so maybe some alignment with the countries, but our foreign policy very clearly say we are non-aligned country. Now, let's say if we are a country under the agreement of NATO, that means North Atlantic Treaty, maybe then you are aligned to that NATO organizations. But Sri Lanka is not like that. It's an independent, non-aligned country. Then other most important thing is environmental management. That's also a very important thing. Now that's a very hot topic and everyone is discussing these points. So many projects, so many development activities we have to carry out. But while we develop our country, we have to uh, safeguard our environment. Now here main thing is facilitating a robust economic growth through required investments while taking measures to ensure the quality of environment leading to sustainable development. Now here it may not restrict the economic growth or the development activities. While we are carrying out these development activities, country has to give due consideration or the due care on the environmental management aspects, mainly considering the sustainable development. Then social protection. Now that's also a very important thing. Sri Lanka is a poor country. There are so many people living below the poverty line. Then government has to give so many concessions, maybe as a financer. Maybe you can see previously we had the Samurdi, then now it's called as the Aswasuma. Now for the kidney patients, maybe the disabled persons and also the pensioners, government is giving so many protection schemes for all the necessary segments of the society. Now that's the priority of the government. Now whatever our tax money, the government has to compensate these segments. Now otherwise they may not able to live within the country because they need the support. Now as a policy, government has taken care these segments. Then regional development, that's also we have to think. Why we have to think about the regional things? Maybe we may have to share the potential. Now let's say if we want to develop offshore wind power, definitely Sri Lanka, India has to collaborate with this kind of thing. And also maybe when we utilize our territorial seas, we have to comply with the regional rules and regulations, those kind of things. Now with that, we will go through in detail about the national energy policy. Now out of these, all the policies, most of these policies, they have identified as policy statements. But now with this national energy policy, they have identified as the policy statement, but other main thing is it's the only policy. I think there could be some other policy, but when you consider the major policies, this is the only policy gazetted by the Sri Lankan government. This policy spells out ways and means of steering the energy sector in transition to power the nation and its social market economy, aiming at higher levels of stability, security, affordability, and sustainability with the least environmental burden and provide fertile ground for all public and private enterprises forms and institutions to flourish the future where energy will not be a constraint. Now, this policy was published or the gazetted in 2019 August. Now almost 4 years left. Now you can think, okay, we are having this kind of gazetted policy, but still we are struggling to provide low cost generation to the people. But now when we go through this content, you can think why we need the consistent national policies. Now, I think yesterday you may heard that, so every news item, they are mentioning Sri Lankan electricity tariff is the highest in the South Asian countries. Okay, that may be true. Now then you can, now when you look at the values, that may be true, but you may have to see why this kind of thing happened. Maybe what kind of root cause we had. By going through the national energy policy pillars, you can identify in which place or in which area we may not be able to comply with these national energy policy pillars. Now here the main primary objective of the national energy policy is to ensure energy security through supplies that are cleaner, secure, economical and reliable to provide convenient, affordable energy services to support socially equitable development of Sri Lanka. Now, this is the national energy policy, not the national electricity policy. Here, energy means power and energy both. That means electricity as well as the petroleum resources as well. This is published by that time Ministry Power, Energy and Business Development in 2019. Now you can see what's kind of inconsistency of the ministry name itself. Now Power, Energy and Business Development. Now that's why in Sri Lanka we are talking about the consistency of the policies. Now, while delegating the authorities to the ministries by the government itself, whether they are having that kind of consistency. Now, here my main objective is why we should have the consistent national energy policy. So, national policies, not only the energy, national policies. Now, the national energy policy is thus founded on 10 pillars rooted in the broad areas impacting the society, economy, and the environment in an effort to counterbalance the forces through enhanced equity, security, and sustainability respectively. Now, what are these 10 pillars? Now, first we will just go through these 10 pillars. Now, here also, I am not expecting you to remember all these 10 pillars, but when you write your responses or your answers, you can at least memorize these concepts and try to include these concepts into your answers. I am not asking direct questions, it's an open-ended question because I know that there are other field students, not only the electrical, so many other civil, mechanical, other engineering disciplines as well. Because of that, I am not asking any questions. Although I am from electricity board, I am not asking anything related particular to the electricity generation. It's open-ended questions and everyone can answer. There is no issue. But here I am trying to explain this national energy policy. Now, by going through all these national policies, this is the major policy. Now, this national energy policy will influence into all the other sectors. And luckily, we are having a gazetted policy in power and energy sector. Now, you can see once we go through these 10 pillars, all these pillars are very well defined. All the objectives were identified, but there are so many lapses in the implementation of this national energy policy. Now, you just think about now, once I explain these 10 items, you can argue by yourself what was the reason, or maybe what are the reasons we may have to face this kind of situation with respect to the power sector, or with respect to the energy sector, or maybe with respect to the finance sector. All the things you can argue. Now, your first point is assuring energy security. Primary and secondary energy supplies of the country will be secured to ensure continuity, adequacy, and reliability. Now, here we are talking about primary and secondary energy supplies. Now, not only the electricity, this I told this is related to the other energy sources, maybe diesel, petrol, kerosene, whatever the food. Now, maybe 1 year back, sorry, 2 years back, you may can think people are waiting along queues to uh, buy the food. Now, what's the now this was published in 2019. Now, we have faced all the things after 2019. Okay, previous years also we may had this situation, but I think everyone can remember within last 2 years what kind of situation we faced, although we had a gazetted national energy policy. Now, in the gazetted national policy, first pillar is the assuring energy security. Now, in that, they have mentioned the country will be secured to ensure continuity, adequacy, and reliability. Now, we may have the long power cuts, we may have the non-availability of the LPG gas, we had the shortages in diesel, petrol, all the fuel. That means now just think about what were the reasons for that one. I am not discussing any political things or anything. Now, there was a very clear gazetted policy. Now, let's say if some person, now since this is a gazetted policy, government has to comply. Not by the government, maybe respective ministries, they may have to comply for these actions. Okay, we can say, okay, we can provide the fuel, or we can provide the electricity if the government grant us the relevant foreign currency to buy the fuel or buy the gas. That kind, it's like a impact on a chain. That means chain. Now, to buy the fuel, we may need the foreign currency. To get the foreign currency, Sri Lanka may have foreign currency. To buy the foreign currency, we should have the local currency. Now, it's like a impact on a chain. The second one, providing access to energy services. Access to reliable, convenient, affordable, equitable, and quality energy services will be provided to all citizens to improve their living standard and to engage in gainful economic activities. Now, when you consider this second pillar, now our country almost, now some person can say almost 100% we have electrified. Now access to electricity we have complied as 100%. Okay, let's say 98%, 99%. When you compare with the other South Asian countries or the Asian countries, this access to energy, mainly the electricity sector, Sri Lanka is a leading country. But other fuel aspects also, providing access to the energy services, when you compare with other countries, we are at a very higher level. Then, providing energy services at the optimum cost to the national economy. Now, that's the other thing. Now, think about this one. Now, to provide the optimum cost, energy services will be provided at the optimum long-term cost to lower the burden on the national economy and to achieve competitiveness of locally produced goods and services in international markets. Now, if you have watched yesterday's news, most of these industrial representatives, they may add their voices regarding the higher electricity tariff. Now, by having such a higher industrial electricity tariff, whether our products can have the competitive advantage in the international markets. That's the thing we have to think. Okay, now root causes may be different things, but I am mainly only focusing on the main aspects, not going into anything about the political things. That's a different thing. Now here we are trying to learn about the national energy policy elements. Now when you read this thing or when you go through these points, just think about what is the present situation with respect to each and every pillar. Then improving energy efficiency and conservation. That's also very important thing. Efficient use of energy will be promoted in all sectors and across the energy value chain, engaging both the suppliers and the users. Now, we may have to adopt the concepts. Now, just think about the power generation, then generation side, as well as the load side, demand side. Now, how do we manage through the demand? That means we have to make aware the consumers. Now, what is the importance of using demand side management principles? How do we efficiently use the electricity within the household applications or maybe the industrial or the other any other application? Now you can see most of these street lights, they may have switch on around 6 o'clock, but maybe previously some person has to go manually and switch on and off these street lights. Now they may have adopted the automatic sensors with the timers. Then every time that will, once the particular time reach, those street lights are automatically switch on. Once the daytime reaches, the switch these street lights will automatically switch off. Now, by introducing that kind of thing, mechanism, we can save majority of wastage through the street lighting aspects. Not only street lighting, now I think you may have heard about this labeling system, star rating. Now every CFL bulb, maybe when you buy a refrigerator or any other electrical item, now all these electrical appliances must have a star rating. A star rating itself provides the feedback to the customer what kind of energy saving you can achieve through this particular equipment compared with another equipment. Then enhancing self-reliance. Indigenous energy resources will be developed to the optimum levels to minimize the dependence on imported resources subject to resolving technical, economic, environmental, and social constraints with objective of minimizing the vulnerability of energy supplies to external situations. Now that's the main thing we have to consider. Now just think about now present international conflicts. Now Middle East conflict is there, Ukraine-Russia conflict, then now recently this conflict near the Red Sea, that is there near Yemen Sea. Now with the Yemen Sea, you can see there are huge impact to the crude oil transportation. Now we are depending on crude oil for our transportation and major part of the power generation. Most of the activities we are depending on the crude oil. Now here self-reliance means what kind of vulnerability we have to face if such situation arose. Now just think about some issue in this Yemen war that will have an impact to the transportation of crude oil or maybe the finished products. Then what kind of impact to the Sri Lankan economy? Whether we have another standby options. Those are the things we have to think. Then caring for the environment. Now that's also very important thing. Now when you invest on the power plants or maybe the transmission lines or maybe the refinery, you can see there will be an impact to the environment. But to minimize these impacts, can you think we should not invest on such a project? Now, country need to proceed with this development. Now, let's say our country needs a new refinery. Now, for that, we may have to invest on this new refinery, but our environmental people, they may object these things by giving due consideration to the environmental aspects only, because that's their field. But as a country, as a government, we have to implement this refinery project or maybe implement a power plant project in order to provide the long-term maybe fuel requirements or maybe the long-term power requirements. If we do not able to implement this new refinery, then what would be the impact? If something happened to our present refinery, we may have to face huge issues. Then we may have to wait along queues to buy the fuel. Maybe we may have to depend on foreign shipments, all the things. Now, that's why now this national energy, every policy, they are giving due consideration to the caring for the environment. Then enhancing the share of renewable energy. Now that's the most important thing. Everyone is talking. Now government is going ahead with the 70% renewable energy criteria. Why we are talking about renewable energy? Now we think it's an indigenous renewable energy resources. Now what do you mean by the indigenous? It's a resource within that particular country. And if we do not use that particular resource, that resource may be waste. And our main objective is when you develop these indigenous resources, the benefit will pass to the particular country personally. Indigenous renewable energy resources will be developed to the optimum level to attain sustainability and higher degree of resilience in the energy sector. Now, what is the resilience in the energy sector? Now, our present energy power sector mainly rely on imported fuels. Now, when you rely on the imported fuel, then what would be the impact? Maybe foreign currency fluctuations, maybe the issues like international conflicts, that kind of thing will have a huge impact. Now, if that kind of impact happen, then you can see what kind of foreign currency outflows in our country. Now, I think all of us had a good practical feelings on this particular topic. We were unable to unload the shipments once the shipment was arrived to our ports, mainly because Sri Lankan government did not have relevant foreign exchange to pay for the particular shipment. Then we may have to pay the demurrage charges, late payment fees, everything to these shipping lines, and that burden ultimately has to pass to the consumers as well. Then to overcome these things, now this national energy policy itself identified enhancing the share of the renewable energy. Now that's the most important thing. Then our other main thing is strengthening good governance in the energy sector. Now that's also very good policy item. Now let's say, now how do we manage this good governance? Mainly with the accountability, fairness, transparency to achieve investor and consumer confidence. Now just think about the implementing of a refinery project. Think about the investment. It definitely it would be more than 1.5 billion, around 2 billion US dollar investment. Now just think about the power plant around 200, 300 megawatt capacity. Now it would be more than definitely 450 million US dollars. Let's say if we go for a around 1000 megawatt power plant, definitely we may have to incur around 1 billion US dollars. Now, investing that kind of amount for a particular sector, you may think there may be so many unsolicited proposals, so many unsolicited deals, so many things will happen. Now, how do you overcome these things? Now, that's why it's mentioned as the good governance in the energy sector. Now, under good governance, our regulatory framework is at presently also there, but we should have the proper regulatory framework covering all the sector aspects. Another main thing is the competitive bidding procedures, but in last year, not the last year, previous year, government has that means in, I think, June 2022, they have passed the new act by removing the clause specifying the competitive bidding procedure for the development of renewable energy resources. Now, that kind of thing will give or will open the gates for the unsolicited proposals. Okay, maybe you can say, now who will invest a country like Sri Lanka? Why? Our country having a negative balance of payment, negative cash flows. We do not have sufficient foreign currency. We may not have reserves. Then in these companies, they may have to invest on an unsecured country. They may not be able to perform all these bidding procedures and other things. For the bidding, if you want to adopt these bidding procedures, they may request government guarantees. Maybe they may need at least government comfort letters. So many things. Other thing is securing land for future energy infrastructure. Now that's also a very important thing. That's why this sector having a long-term plans. Now let's say if we want to build a refinery, maybe let's say if we want to implement the new refinery by 2030, now itself we may have to start by all these activities having very long lead times. Now for that kind of activities, maybe the construction of transmission lines, construction of a major power plant, so many approvals, so many clearances they have to obtain from different authorities. Maybe environmental impact assessments they may have to carry based on the EIA studies. They may have to do so many simulations, so many other activities they may have to carry out, like stakeholder engagement, stakeholder discussions, all the things. Why? It may take time to develop this kind of projects, mainly because they are having very long lead times. Then for this kind of projects, now let's say if we want to start the project by another 4 years time, now itself we may have to reserve or secure the land for such future energy infrastructure. Now that is identified by the energy policy as a one pillar. Then last pillar, they have identified providing opportunities for the innovation and entrepreneurship. Now that's also very important thing. Now that's why I told art, research and development, science and technology. All the things should facilitate for the new innovation and the new entrepreneurship within the country. Now, there are 10 pillars I have explained to you. These 10 pillars, they have identified with these three dimensions. Now, one is called the energy security. Other one is called the energy sustainability. Other item is called the energy equity. Now you can understand what you mean by the energy security. Now those clauses, now just think number three, providing energy services at the optimum cost to the national economy. That pillar is categorized under national energy security. Number 4, improving energy efficiency and conservation. Number 5, enhancing self-reliance. Then again 10, providing opportunities for innovation and entrepreneurship. That is identified under energy security. Then energy sustainability, 6, 7, 8. Caring for the environment, enhancing the share of renewable energy, strengthening good governance in the sector. Then energy equity, assuring energy security, providing access to the energy, securing land for future energy infrastructure. Now, these things, maybe you can think, why this number 10 under energy security? It could be categorized under energy sustainability. Maybe you can have your own observations, but these are the way they have identified while developing this national energy policy, and this was developed with the participation of all the stakeholders. There was so much pressure from different groups to change these pillars, and maybe some pillars they may need to completely remove so many things, but ultimately this was gazetted in 2019. Now almost 4 years lapsed. Now it has reached to the 5th year as well. You can see whether these pillars are complied by the government relevant ministries or maybe the institutions, and if not, just identify what are the root causes or what kind of impacts they may have come across during compliance of these national energy policy pillars. Now with that, we will proceed with the national transportation policy. Actually, this is a draft policy. I think this policy is not yet gazetted or published like a national energy policy. This is just a policy still in the draft stage, but it's a very long outstanding policy. This was initiated before before drafting the national energy policy. That's the issue. Now, in our country, there are so many draft documents. To convert these draft documents into published documents, it may take huge time. Now, ultimately, Sri Lanka do not have a national transportation policy yet. Now, without this kind of national transportation policy, so many inconsistent policy decisions were taken by the government or maybe the ministry level based on maybe the influencer, political influencers, or maybe the influencers by the individual ministers, or maybe the inconsistent decisions taken by the official. Now, this national transportation policy also prepared based on a similar concept of the national energy policy. Actually, a national energy policy, while they prepare the national energy policy, they have referred the national transportation policy as a reference document. Now here they are mainly discuss about the uh, transportation system is vital to sustain and enhance economic development and quality of the life of the country. Now, just think about these two words, enhance economic development. Now, you can see whether our transportation system will facilitate this enhance economic development. Just think about then whether that will facilitate quality of the life. Now, if you travel by a train or the private bus or the CTB bus, can you feel the quality of the life? That's the concern. Now, the policy itself starts with these two items. The transport sector contributes to the economic development in Sri Lanka in different manners, such as networking the relationship between the consumers and producers, improving the performance by reducing cost and time of travel, increasing reliability, and improving the productivity by increasing access to diverse group of inputs and broader market to output. Then what are the objectives? That's also a very important thing. Demonstrate the need of transport infrastructure and services to be efficient and be in line with the development goals of national, provincial, and rural level in Sri Lanka. Now it's like pillars in national transportation policy, but national energy policy very clearly identified the 10 pillars, but here they have identified the objectives. Now just think about, now here in this particular module, definitely in a question, one question you will get it under question, maybe two parts. One part will relate to these policies. Now just argue with yourself whether these statements are correct or wrong. Okay, maybe you may not can take a firm decision. You may have the pros and cons and just apply these statements to the today's context and see what kind of decisions we may have to get to carry out these particular objectives to achieve the final outcome of these objectives, and otherwise you can analyze what were the incorrect decisions or the inconsistent decisions maybe the government or the officials they may have taken previously, and now we are suffering the impacts. Provide necessary guidance to stakeholders in transportation sector to improve transport systems to achieve strategic objectives and priorities of the government. Guide on the necessary investment priorities for achieving the expected outcomes in the transportation sector and to achieve global trends in development targets. Now, other main thing is here. Now, think about the bus transport systems. Now, we may have adopted public transport and the private transport system. Now, what? Now, do you think by providing facilities to the private transportation systems, whether the people are getting the quality of life through traveling a public transport, private transport system? Now, let's say in a government bank and private bank, or maybe a government hospital and the private hospital. You may have to pay, that's true, maybe additional cost, but quality of service may be different. But whether you will feel if you are traveling inside the private bus, that's the main thing. But they may have so many things. You have to pay you are paying some higher value for the travel, whether they are giving you the desired or your expected service. Provide the platform to enhance the efficiency in long-term decision making regarding the infrastructure improvement and service management in the transportation sector. Then policy principles. Now, same way as the pillars, they may have identified policy principles. Now, these are the objectives. Now, they have identified these objectives. Now, to achieve these objectives, they have identified some policy principles. Now, in national energy policy, if you really want, you may able to download, that is available in the web as a gazette. You may give me a 1 minute, okay? Okay, sorry. Now here, just go through the policy principles. First one is accessible transport systems. Now, just think about the accessibility of the transportation system, whether we are having the basic transport needs. Now here, transport systems are designed to meet the basic transport needs of citizens and business and promote effective and efficient integration of all transport systems to complement each other using new technologies and related developments. Now, one example is this multimode transport center near this Homagama, Makumbura. Now here their main objective is to integrate this highway transportation system and the other normal public transport systems, all the things, and people, they can use their own vehicles, and they can parking facilities there. All the things are there. Now that's the concept they want to develop, but only one place they have developed such a thing. Uh, then energy efficiency and environmental protection. That's also we may have to consider. Now, when you consider the environmental impacts of the uh, emission of the transportation system, it's very critical because all these emissions are at the level of lower levels, not like higher levels. Then there will be a direct impact to the human. Then energy efficiency, that's also you have to consider. Normally when you pass through maybe a public bus, maybe CTB bus, or maybe especially the armed forces vehicles, you can see there are some issues regarding because these vehicles, actually these we may not able to blame these institutes because they have to get the money from the Sri Lankan government. Maybe they may not able to do the repairs and other things. Then, but let's say if it's a CTB bus, definitely people are waiting for the bus to arrive. Then by having all these emission tests, all the things, they may not be able to comply. But now, after adopting this emission test concept, most of these problems were minimized, but still there are some concerns. And all modes of transportation should be guided towards an efficient and cost-saving energy policy. Transport services to be provided in sustainable manner with minimum environmental disruption. Now we are talking about the electrification of the trains. We are talking about the natural gas or the compressed natural gas driven CNG driven three-wheelers, maybe the hired vehicle system, but nothing has implemented in our country, but so many discussions are there. Then increase safety and security. Transport services to be safe, comfortable and reliable. Provide safe environment for women, children, elderly and differently able people in designing transport infrastructure. Now, just think about whether it's safe, comfortable, reliable. I think all three were not complied in our transportation system. Then positive contribution to economy. Improve the efficiency and quality of the transport services at a reasonable cost that would adequately meet existing and potential demand for movement of passengers and goods that would support economic and social development. Maximize the private sector investment and public-private partnerships. Then integration of land use and transport planning. Now that's the other main important thing. Integrate land use developments and transport systems development so that travel distance are minimized to access to livelihood, education and other social needs of the population is improved with the help of new transport and non-transport interventions, new technologies and related strategies. Give me a minute, okay? Then we can see these policy goals promote the efficient movement of people, goods in order to support sustainable economic development, promote social inclusion to allow equitable access to all, provide safe transport system that minimize damages, injuries, and loss of lives. Now just think this uh, policy goal, whether we may able to achieve at least some level. Now every day we can see so many accidents, so many fatal accidents. Now here do not think we are talking only on uh, public transportation system. That should include the private sector transportation systems as well. Then protect the environment, sustainability, and improve health. Now, all these things are under draft national transportation policy. Since it's a draft, no one has to comply these aspects. Now, if it's a gazetted transport policy, then everyone has to comply, and that should be guideline or the rules. But here it's not like that. Now, with that, I will conclude the first part, national energy policy, and do not memorize anything, or do no need to uh, go through each and every aspect of these points, but you should have an overall view on these policies. And main thing, now just think about, now people are saying why our road networks are like that, why we are having, now let's say if you want to travel to Kandy, central parts of Sri Lanka, we may not able to complete our expressways. Now these may be started, I think, more than 10 to 15 years back, but up to now we may not able to complete it. Now in energy sector, we are still depend on our Sapagaskanda refinery. Why may not able to implement a new refinery, efficient refinery? Our power plants are old. Why may we may not able to rehabilitate, or maybe the now these power plants, some are more than 30 years, 25 years, then end of the lifetime. Almost these things are nearly end of the lifetime. Still we are using, okay, maybe we may not have, country may not have sufficient investment, but if we have a proper policies, we have to think in advance those things, and everyone has to comply. Maybe the government, maybe the other ministries, they may have to support these activities to comply with these national policies. Our main issue is there are so many influences. Now just think about this organic fertilizer case. Now this organic fertilizer, government has taken a decision, maybe it's a very aggressive or the very quick decision without thinking the impacts to the farmers, as well as without thinking the impact to the general citizens in the Sri Lanka. Then ultimately what has happened? It's a whole country had to face so many issues, not only fuel issues, not only the power issues, as well as government has to spend to import the rice as well. Not only the rice, that has an impact to the tea sector, then the export-oriented crops, all the things. Then ultimately we had a severe impact to the foreign exchange. Now, with these concepts, we will try to go to the next part, that means the national economy, Sri Lankan economy. When we learn these concepts, you can imagine or you can observe why we need the consistent policies. If we have a consistent policies, then definitely we may able to overcome so many issues we are facing now. Now, mainly inconsistent policies that leads to the present crisis in Sri Lanka. Now, in here we will learn maybe now this particular part I will continue in the next day as well. Then all these IMF guidelines, all the things I will brief. Then you may think why IMF should tell or inform to the Sri Lankan government. If we adopt these things, automatically our country may have overcome these situations. Now here, just for the comparison, I have given you the June 2023 and December 2023 values. Now here, inflation is almost similar. Our economic growth in Q1 in 2023, it's around minus 11.5. In Q3, it's 1.6. Now here minus, you can see now it has reached to a plus value. Now here dollar rate, it's around 323. Now if you compare the first January 2023, these values may be different, but here I am comparing the December and the June 2023 values. Now here 311. Now policy interest rates previously high. Now these interest rates government has reduced. Now every time this central bank governor, when he had the press conference, everyone is asking whether government will reduce the policy rates. Now that policy rates, now I think if you can remember, we had these rates around 30%, because that time initially, I think in 2022, initial years, no one government requested people to deposit the money in fixed deposits, and they are giving around 32% interest rates. For the loans also, they were adopted more than 36%. But what's the objective of those things? Now they want people, now government want to reduce the people spending. Why? If people spends more, then they are expecting more things to import the products. That means government has put a severe ban, import bans. Then due to the restrictions of the dollars, as well as government didn't have the Sri Lankan rupees as well. Then they want to attract, or they want to get all the money with the people, and their intention was to give very high interest rate for the fixed deposits. Now just think, now FD interest rate is, let's say, 12 to 13%. But if someone say, I will give you 30%, 32%, then automatically you may think that's the best thing I should invest. Now this is the best time I should invest on an FD, because I am getting 32%, 33% interest rates. Now with the local debt restructuring, now government will say we may not able to pay this 32%. That's a different story. Now that's the part of, now not only the foreign debt restructuring, local debt restructuring also that will happen. Okay. Now here unemployment, those things are not very much change, per capita income and other things. But here mainly you can see the growth. Now compared to the quarter one of 2023, quarter three, we had some growth, economic growth that may mainly contribute through the tourism sector. We may have now, before going into the details about the economic Sri Lankan economy, it would be better to understand of some basic economic terms. Here, I am not going to teach you any economic theories. Just I want to emphasize on some basic economic terms. Now, first one is called the aggregate demand. Now, what do you mean by aggregate demand? It's now first I will go through the small equation. Now, do not memorize these equations. Now, it's a total demand. Now, C means consumer spending on goods and services. Now, here consumer spending means now you may be a consumer. Now, if I spend something on what to buy a good or buy a service, that's the C. Now, let's say in Sri Lanka, let's say 2 billion people. Now, that 2 billion people, let's say everyone is spent more, okay, maybe out of 2 billion, maybe let's say 1.5 billion people have able to do some transaction. Now, whatever they spend on goods and services, that will call as a C. Now, here we are talking about the macroeconomic level, whole country level, not as microeconomic context. Then, second one, I. Now, this is consumer spending on goods and services. Now in a country, not only the consumers, then private company, private investment, and corporate spending on non-final capital goods. That means factories, equipment, etc. Now, private investments, there will be private investments. Then other one will be government spending. Now, government also has to spend. So, government will do the infrastructure. Government maintaining the education systems. Government will pay the pensions. Government will spend on the hospitals, all the things. Now, here, consumer is one category. Private investments, that means the industries, that kind of things, they will do the investments. Then government. Now, here you will have the private sector and the public sector and the consumer. Now, consumers, whatever the things they spend, private sector, whatever the things they spend, okay, you can say it's as investment. Now, here to differentiate these different things. Now here also you can say private spending, but here it's mentioned as investments. Government spendings, it could be an investment, it could be payment of salaries, so whatever the things, that is we identify that as the G. Then net exports minus imports, whatever the things we are exporting, and also we are importing the product. Now here we are talking about net exports. Now in Sri Lanka, normally our imports are higher than the exports income. Now this may be a negative value. Then our aggregate demand is C plus I plus G plus NX. Now N means net value. For the exports, it's mentioned as X. Now that's the normal definition of writing this aggregate demand. Now when you write these economic questions, questions related to the national economy, now you can identify a person called consumer, then a private sector, government sector, and the exports. Export and import, whatever the thing go out from the Sri Lanka or coming inside Sri Lanka. Then that's the one thing I want to explain to you as a one term. Then other second term, I want to emphasize on the gross domestic product, GDP. Now, what do you mean by gross? Domestic means within the country. Total market value of all final goods and services produced within the country. Now, here you can see GDP. It's there. Policy per capita income. Now this per capita income, this value is the gross domestic product divided by the population. Okay, here I have not mentioned the GDP value, but in next maybe other later slides I will show you. Then that is very important thing. GDP is the total market value of all final goods and services produced within the country. Then second one, gross national product, output produced by the country's citizens. Now, what is the difference between the GDP and GNP? Gross national product and gross domestic product. Now, gross domestic product, total market value of all final goods and services produced within the country. Now, let's say Sri Lanka is an island nation. Now, if you ring fence the Sri Lanka, then you can identify what would be the total market values of final goods and services. Now, gross national product means GDP plus whatever the output produced by the country's citizens. Country's citizens may be within the country or some may be live in foreign countries. Then you have to add the people who are living in other countries but Sri Lankan citizens. Now GNP, it would be very difficult to calculate, but okay, maybe you can get some approximate idea. Definitely when you compare with the GDP and GNP, definitely GNP would be high, but let's say some countries, their GNP is very high compared with the GDP value. Why? Their main target or main objective is to send people outside or the abroad, and okay, maybe whether they are getting the remittances or not, it's a different thing. That's the other thing. Now, when you calculate the GDP and GNP values, if you can see some very high value or higher percentage of GNP compared with the GDP component, that means government should have some mechanisms to attract these that means our country's citizens who are living in other countries to remit their income, maybe transfer their remittances much as possible. Then nominal values. based on current dollar terms. Now, when you compare these economic terms, you will have a different mechanism. There are comparisons based on the nominal values. Nominal values means present dollar terms. Real values, reference to base year rates adjusted for the inflation. Now, nominal value and real value. Now, real value, you will have a base year. Now, in Sri Lanka, most of the time, previously we had the base year around 2002, then it has changed to 2010. Now, maybe they are discussing to change the base years, but now normally this reference year should be a normal year, not like 2019, 2020. Now during that time COVID, then 2022, we were passed through very worse financial crisis situation. Then those kind of years we should not select as the reference year. Then interest rates, can have two definitions: floating interest rates or fixed interest rates. Now, presently, we are having a floating interest rate. That means market supply and demand that will determine the interest rates. Let's say if we have a fixed interest rates, then government definitely has to pump additional money to keep the interest rate fixed. Normally, now in our present mechanism, now with the IMF recommendation, government has to float the interest rates depend on the market demand and supply situation. Dollar rate will be defined. Now here you can see, now in June 2023, it was around 323. Now it's 311. Now major contribution may be this economic growth. Now here you can see plus 1.6. Now previously it was minus 11.5. Now when economy is having a positive growth, automatically these exchange rates may be reduced. Now interest rates also similar, I think. Now here 11%, 12%. Now here 9 and 10. Now these things government may, now in our system, interest rates may be somewhat fixed, but in pure economic terms, it should be allowed for the dynamic changes, but interest rates still government is influencing, but they are changing these policy rates frequently than previously, but now they are allowing exchange rates to fluctuate. Then other main thing is, now every time when you read the news, you can hear these things: balance of payment, current account, capital account, financial accounts. Now, to understand the reality of a country, you should have this basic knowledge on these economic terms. Now, what do you mean by the current account? Now, in a country, now this is the country current account. Now, in country current account, there are two accounts. That is, we call the visible trade account. Now, here the trading. Trading means imports, exports. Now, if the imports is greater than exports, it's a deficit. If the exports are greater than imports, it's a surplus. Now, this current account comprised with two accounts. Visible trade account, that is, you can physically see. Now, that means it's having the tangible goods. Now, invisible trade accounts, it's having the services, tourism, remittances. Maybe government has invest on money in some other country, they are getting the interest. Now, most of the time, the services, tourism, remittances, interest, you will have some inflow to the country. But some services, okay, maybe we may have to pay some amounts, but ultimately, now here do not think this related to only the government transactions. All now this is the country's current account. That's why central banks role you can visualize here. Whatever the money we are sending to the other country, or maybe whatever the things we are getting from other countries as the foreign exchange, if these transactions are channeled through a mechanism which could be controlled by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, you can reflect the true picture of the current accounts. Now, that's why during the first period of the financial crisis, government requested all the imports and exports should be, that means payment should be carried out through the banking sector only. Then just think now here current accounts normally. Now just think about the Sri Lankan situation. Previously we had the huge imports and some lower exports. Then definitely we have the deficit because we may not have the surplus. But now these days maybe our exports may be higher than imports, mainly due to the imports bans imposed by the central bank. But now imports bans were lifted for the most of the items. Then why they want to control the current account? Now current account means now imports and exports means it's the direct foreign exchange transactions are happening here. Now to pay the imports, to open the LC, Sri Lankan government should have the sufficient dollars in their account. Now to pay the imports, definitely we should have the sufficient dollars in our banking system. Now what's the other account? We call the capital account. Now capital account having capital inflows and outflows. Now if we have a capital inflows higher than the outflows, it's a surplus. If the capital outflows are higher than the inflows, then the deficit. Now here capital now these are the long-term. Capital means it's a long-term investments. Now when we have, now let's say if we want to implement a let's say refinery. Now we once we award the contract to some company, just think about 1.5 billion capital investment. Then that investment maybe just think about now 3 installments they are investing in Sri Lanka. Then 500 million, 500 million, 500 million. That we call as the inflow. Now maybe later, after let's say after the second year onwards, we may have to pay that capital to them with the interest as well, but all the things are capital outflows. Then whatever these capital inflows, maybe later we may have to pay as the outflows. Then now the situation in Sri Lanka, no one is investing in here. We do not have any inflows, but we may have to pay so many capital loans, capital payments now we may have to carry out. That means now outflows are higher than the inflows, then that we have a deficit. Now for that deficit, now that's the thing IMF is suggesting to do the debt loan restructuring. Now same way for the short-term borrowings and reserves, if the reserves now within Sri Lanka, if we are having a higher reserves than the borrowings, it's surplus. If the borrowings are higher than the reserves, it's deficit. Now, in a situation, now I think everyone knows that we didn't have sufficient reserves, maybe 100 million US dollars even to pay for the crude oil, maybe a shipment of a diesel or maybe the petrol or maybe the gas. Sometimes to raise 50 million US dollars, we may have to wait for a 2 to 3 days. That means we do not have the reserves, but our borrowings were very high. Then this balance of payment means the addition of these three plus there is some balancing item. Forget about that one. That's somewhat purely economic theories. Now just think about the main thing: current account, capital account, financial account. Now, if the current, normally in our case, current account is a deficit, capital account is a deficit, financial account is a deficit. Then every time our BOP is negative. But what would be the equilibrium? It should be 0. But if the BOP is plus, then that would be good thing to a country. But sometimes, now one of the account may be surplus. Now then our ministers, maybe the government officials, they are talking very much, but ultimately we want to see whether whether our whole BOP is positive, but at least if let's say in I think 2022, 2021, our visible trade account was a surplus. Why? There were very less imports, mainly because the government imposed a ban on imports. Okay, that's the other thing. Then here also we had some surplus while government didn't pay any capital repayments. Okay, then okay, then the economic indicators. Now these economic indicators with this theoretical background, now we will try to learn our economic indicators. Now one is the production, income, employment. Now under these categories, so many economic indicators are defined. Then price levels and inflation, fiscal policies, demand management policy or the monetary policies, trade and industry policy. Now, why we need the trade and industry policies? That is related to the growth. Then BOP, balance of payment. Now here, balance of payment means mainly the foreign exchange flows and inflows and outflows. Then international wealth and liabilities, those things are defined under different categories. Now here you can say rate of growth of GDP. Now just think about what do you mean by GDP, gross domestic product. Now rate of growth of per capita GDP. Now this is per capita GDP. Now here just think about, now this is the same because per capita GDP is defined for the year, not for the quarter. They are defined for the one. That's why this is 2023 value US dollars 3,474. Now here, if you compare with our previous values, most of the time our value is like similar. That means our GDP didn't have a much growth during previous years. Then rate of unemployment, rate of inflation, rate of domestic savings, rate of national investment, change in the structure of the economy, capital output ratio. Now here, do not memorize anything about these indicators or whatever the things, but just have a overview on these concepts. Now, when you consider the economic indicators, now we are telling budget surplus, deficit in current account or overall. Now, if someone say deficit in the current account or surplus in the current account, you should know what do you mean by this current account. Now, in current account, we are having two things: visible trade accounts, invisible trade accounts. Sometimes they may say invisible trade account, we are having a surplus. Now, normally in invisible trade account, every time we are having a surplus. Why? Through the invisible trade accounts. Now, tourism, we are talking about whatever the income we are getting into the Sri Lanka. Okay. Then revenue as a percentage of GDP, growth of public debt. That's also a very important thing. Now, how much you have to pay as a debt? Now, in Sri Lanka, one person, how much we have to pay as a debt? Now, government may have taken the loan or the borrowings, but ultimately it's a burden to the people in Sri Lanka. The balance of payment, current account. Now that's the most important thing. With current account balance is very important thing. Overall balance as a percentage of GDP, the terms of trade, level of external reserves, so many things. Now those are economic terms. Then the social terms. Now that's also very important thing. Under social terms, we are talking about life expectancy at birth, infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, fruit birth rate, fruit death rate. That means total fertility rate, literacy level. Now in Sri Lanka, we are boasting that we are having very high literacy level. Then school enrollment rate. Now you can link these things with the education policy. Now our government policy is to provide free education for all the students until year 30. Now with that, our school enrollment rates are very high. Then prevalence of under 5 child malnutrition. Now previously, our country, we didn't have such a situation, but now latest studies, they were revealed that most of the students in the rural areas, they are suffering from the child malnutrition. Then poverty head count. Same way, political indicators you can identify: regularity of the elections, freedom and fairness of elections, sharing power, devolution of power, multi-party systems, freedom of speech. Now everyone is talking about this freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of the media, maybe social media, incidents of political violence. Why these things very important? Incidents of grave crimes, violation of human rights, governance, transparency, independence, judiciary corruption. Why these political indicators are very important? Now, if we do not have very good political indicators, definitely, now European Union, maybe the other countries, European countries, they impose different trade restrictions because everyone wants the fairness or the transparency or the good governance within the country. Now, otherwise, these Asian region countries, African region countries, mainly they are facing with huge corruption and other issues. That's the thing. Okay, with that, shall we conclude for the today? And we'll continue. Otherwise, it's too much for you. Maybe next Friday, we'll continue these things. Maybe if you need any clarifications or anything, we can have some. If you need anything to clarify, you can ask me now, or maybe we can discuss during the next class. I know most of the students, they will try this question under this particular section. That's my personal experience. Maybe that main thing is while going through these notes, you can write the uh, question easily. That means your answers very easily, because this is a not a highly theoretical question, or highly no need to uh, refer a lot of things. By maybe now itself, just go through, watch the TV, maybe foreign news, maybe the Sri Lankan news, maybe the paper articles related to the some main headings and the economic terms. Just read, then you can gather so many uh, things to include in this question when you write the answers to these questions. If, do you have any question thing to clarify?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Yes. Regarding previous exam paper, so
Yeah.
if we suppose if we get a question like this regarding the discuss the strategic utilization of emerging technologies to foster economic development in Sri Lanka. So in your response, consider the potential areas of impact, challenges, and the role of stakeholders in driving this transformation. So in such a question, how to how much extent we have to give our
Okay. I think
that
we'll
means give
discuss.
our opinion or either
Yeah.
answer
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think
for
since you
this
are
particular question, sir,
okay.
because
Now,
it's a one single question.
yeah.
So in that case, for how much extent we have to
Okay. Actually, you are asking me a question regarding a previous paper. Mainly, this once I complete the complete two lectures. Uh, Now, up to now, I have taught you mainly the national policy and some part of the economic indicators. Mainly, when you write down this kind of question, at least you may have to cover. Now it's a 25 mark question. And now out of 25 marks means you have to your pass mark, you may have to get the, I think, minimum 50. Uh, Now I know that by attempting this question, some students may have taken almost 20, 22 like that marks. Maybe some students, they may achieve only around 2 to 3 marks. Mainly depend, now when you write down this kind of question, you have to at least focus key points, but not in a point form, maybe some descriptive form. At least now for a 25 marks question, at least you have to identify 10 key points. At least I am telling. Then let's say if you identify at least 10 key points, I am not saying that for the every point I am giving 2 marks, but uh, do not write just point forms. Just give some brief description, and when you write, because that's my personal experience, every time I observe that initial points, they are writing so many descriptions describing so many things, but maybe the last points they are not describing at all. It's just a point form. But do not do like that. No need to elaborate the. Now let's say if you want to elaborate something about the gross domestic product or something, do not write the half page, but maybe 3 to 4 lines, or let's say at least 5 lines, that would be sufficient. Then other points, every point write like that. And I will just tell one thing. I can't say like that because I know that most of the students, they will try question 1, question 2, like that, section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4. But some students, they start with this particular question. Then I can see some students, they have written more than 3 to 4 pages responses for my question only. Then definitely I know they may not have time to complete the other questions as well. Then you have to manage the time properly. Okay, whatever the things, now when I complete the next day, I will explain more about what kind of key points you have to write when you write your answers. Okay, because since this is too early to comment your uh, uh, question, because all my notes having the points you may are expecting to write in the your question. I do not know whether they have shared this note or note with you or not. Definitely I will send to the ISL because I am having they are having my notes. I do not know whether they have shared with you or not. Okay, please go through this note. No need to refer the additional things. Just go through my notes. Just take the idea. Do not memorize. Take the idea. Then definitely you can answer this question. Okay. Hope that would be okay. But anyway, we can have a further discussion on after completing my session on next day. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions? Then shall we stop for today? Then shall we finish? Then have a good weekend.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Then good night.
Good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, good night.
Okay, sir. Good night, sir.
Good night. Okay.
Good night,
Bye.
sir.
Good night. Bye. Okay.
Thank you, sir.